They say some houses remember, not in the way people do with memories and emotions, but in deeper ways, in groans and sighs, in shadows that cling too long to corners, in air that weighs heavy on your chest, like the house is watching you, breathing just behind your neck. That's the feeling I got the moment I stepped inside. It was an old two-story Victorian on the edge of town, surrounded by pine trees that swayed like they were whispering secrets to one another. The paint was peeling, and the windows were clouded with a filmy haze that no amount of Windex could ever fix. But the inside it was worse. Still, I had agreed to house sit, and the money was good. The owner, Mr. Kessler, was an older man, with a permanent scowl and a voice like he'd spent decades yelling into storm winds. When he handed me the keys earlier that day, he gave one last piece of advice. His words were low and careful, like he didn't want the wind to hear. If you hear anything, he said, hesitating, no. When you hear something, don't go looking for it. He didn't smile. He didn't laugh like it was a joke. His eyes sunken and rimmed red like he hadn't slept in years, just stared straight into mine until I nodded. I should have taken him more seriously. That first evening was uneventful. I walked through the house, getting familiar with the layout. The furniture looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. Dust coated everything. Picture frames hung crooked, most of them containing faded portraits of people I didn't recognize, none of whom looked particularly happy to be remembered. By 10 p.m., I settled in the living room with a book, trying to ignore the uneasy sensation. Crawling over my skin, the fireplace was unused and the heater barely worked, so the cold clung to me like a wet blanket. I turned up the volume on my phone's music just enough to drown out the occasional groan of the wooden beams overhead. Then I heard it a whisper, soft, almost musical, floating down the stairs like it had slipped from someone's lips, just out of reach. Please. I paused the music, staring toward the stairwell, my breath caught in my throat. I listened again. Nothing. I shook my head. Probably the wind, I told myself. Or maybe the old house letting out another tired moan. But even as I tried to convince myself, I stood frozen because it hadn't sounded like the house. It hadn't sounded like the wind. It had sounded human. I walked over to the base of the staircase and looked up. The hallway above was dark. Not pitch black, but that deep sort of gray where shapes can hide just beyond recognition. Please, help me. It came again. Clearer. Closer. My heart skipped a beat. I gripped the banister, my knuckles going white, my legs tense like they were ready to bolt up the stairs, to find whoever was speaking. Some instinct inside me, something deeply human, wanted to respond, to help, but then I remembered Mr. Kessler's warning. Don't go looking for it. I whispered it to myself like a prayer, and slowly stepped away from the stairs. My pulse was thudding in my ears. I turned back toward the living room, hoping that distraction would shake the tension building in my chest. Then came the third whisper, right behind me, don't leave me. It felt like breath against the back of my neck. I spun around. So fast I nearly lost my balance. Nothing, just the long hallway stretching back into shadow. My skin broke out in goosebumps, and I suddenly felt very, very cold. I stood there, rooted, unsure of what to do. Every horror movie instinct screamed at me to get out, leave, run. But the paycheck was too good, and logic still whispered its own excuses. Old houses do strange things. You're tired. You're just imagining it. I needed something to ground myself, something normal. A cup of tea, maybe. I walked toward the kitchen, trying to steady my breathing. Behind me, the house shifted. The floor above creaked as though someone or something was moving, but I didn't look back. I didn't want to know. The kitchen was just off the hallway, a narrow space with low ceilings and cabinets that looked like they hadn't been opened since the 1950s. Every surface was layered in a fine dust, and the air smelled faintly of mothballs and something older-like. Damp wood left to rot beneath forgotten floorboards. I moved quietly, careful not to make too much noise. The house had gone still again, but not peacefully. It was the kind of silence that felt deliberate, like something was waiting. I flipped on the kitchen light, and for a moment the old bulb buzzed and flickered above me before fading out entirely, leaving me in the dark. I cursed under my breath. Of course, this place probably hadn't had proper wiring in decades. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. The weak beam cut a narrow path through the shadows, barely illuminating the room. The edges of everything seemed to twitch in the corners of my vision shapes that vanished the moment I turned my head. I grabbed a mug from the shelf, rinsed it, and filled the kettle with water, setting it gently on the stove. The ticking of the igniter and the eventual whoosh of flame were the first real, grounded sounds I'd heard in a while. They made me feel ... temporarily safe. That's when I heard it again. Don't leave me. Clear, right behind me. As if someone had spoken directly into my ear. I spun around, almost dropping my phone. Its light danced wildly across the room, catching nothing but dusty cabinets and the glint of the knife rack by the counter. No footsteps, no shadows, no one. I stood still, heart hammering. The air was colder now, noticeably so. I could see, my breath blooming in short clouds with each panicked exhale. The feeling in the room had shifted completely from eerie to suffocating. I backed toward the counter, grabbing the largest kitchen knife I could find. My hands trembled as I gripped, the handle, the metal cold against my palm. I didn't know what I thought I'd fight off with it, but holding it gave me a sliver of control. Then came a bang from upstairs, loud, jarring like a heavy piece of furniture being dragged across the floor. I froze. Another sound followed. Not a whisper this time, but a low, muffled crying, like a child whimpering into a pillow. It bled through the walls and floorboards, seeping into every corner of the house. The sorrow in it was thick, raw. It twisted my gut in ways I couldn't explain. I stood motionless for what felt like forever, caught between two instincts. Run the hell out the front door. Or go upstairs and find whatever was making those sounds. But then something else happened. The crying stopped. And instead, from within the walls, soft at first, but growing, came whispers. Dozens of them, overlapping, layered like smoke. Some in voices too high to be human, others too deep. I couldn't make out the words at first, just the rhythm like a chant spoken through rotting wood. I slowly stepped out of the kitchen and into the hallway again. My flashlight flickered, once, twice, then the beam settled and landed on something at the top of the staircase. A figure, not fully formed, just a suggestion of a person. Pale, backlit by the weak glow from a bedroom behind it. It didn't move. It didn't speak. It just stood there, its head tilted, slightly like it was listening. I held my breath, blinked. It was gone. The beam of my phone trembled as I raised it back toward the stairs. Nothing, just darkness. Then the whispers returned, louder than ever. But now they weren't coming from above, they were coming from every direction. Beneath the floorboards, behind the walls, from inside the air itself. Don't look. Don't leave. Don't touch it. Don't go. Please help me. I backed against the wall, trying to keep my hands from shaking. The wood felt freezing beneath my fingers, like touching something buried underground. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the house key Mr. Kessler had given me, useless, no locks to turn now. I looked at the front door, but something inside me knew even if I opened it, I wouldn't make it out. Not yet, not like this. Then something cold brushed against my leg. I gasped, pointing the flashlight down. Nothing, but the cold lingered. A kind of damp chill, like something wet had just brushed by me. I turned toward the base of the stairs, eyes scanning the shadows. The knife in my hand felt more like a toy than a weapon. My brain screamed at me to run, to leave the damn house and never look back. But I didn't, because I had to know. I had to know what was making those sounds, who was whispering, why the house felt like it was alive, like it was watching me. Breathe. So I stepped toward the stairs, and just before I touched the first step, I heard it again. Please, come upstairs. Only this time, it was my voice. The voice, it was mine. Not just similar, identical. The tone, the rhythm, the breath between words. as though someone had recorded me saying something I never said and was now playing it back through the dark. Please, come upstairs. My legs locked at the base of the staircase. Every instinct I had screamed to turn around, to run for the front door and never look back. But curiosity is a cruel thing. It wraps around fear like ivy and whispers lies into your ear. Maybe someone really is up there. Maybe they need help. Maybe the house is testing you. I swallowed hard. Gripping the knife tighter, I placed one foot on the first step. The wood groaned beneath me, loud enough to make me flinch. I paused, expecting the voice again, a whisper, anything, but the house had gone still. Step by step I ascended, my flashlight jittering with every breath. The beam painted the walls in dull gray, revealing peeling wallpaper and picture frames covered in dust. All the faces inside those frames seemed to be watching me. Their faded expressions warped by time and heat, eyes blurred but still aware. At the top of the stairs, the hallway stretched out before me, narrow and unwelcoming. Doors lined the walls on either side, each one cracked just enough to suggest something might be peeking through. But only one door at the far end was open wider than the rest. A faint orange glow pulsed from within, flickering like candlelight. That had to be it. The source. The hallway felt wrong the closer I got. It was colder, and the shadows stretched in unnatural ways, bending at odd angles like they were trying to reach across the walls to grab me. My footsteps were muffled now, as though the house was swallowing sound. I paused just outside the open door. That faint glow was barely enough to see the room inside. I raised my phone to shine in, heart pounding so hard I could hear it echo in my ears. The room was filled with furniture covered in dusty white sheets, a vanity against the wall, a cracked mirror with something etched into the glass words I couldn't read yet, shelves lined with books whose titles had long since faded. And in the corner, beneath a broken window, sat a small wooden chair. A doll rested on it. It was porcelain, cracked along one cheek, with wild black hair and a faded blue dress. Its eyes were glossy black, reflecting the light in a way that made them look wet, alive, and it was staring right at me. The whispers returned, not from the hallway, not from behind the walls, from in the room, from the doll. Don't leave me, please. Don't leave me. I couldn't breathe. My legs screamed to run, but I stepped inside instead, like something unseen was guiding me. The moment I crossed the threshold, the air dropped several degrees. My breath turned visible again, white clouds puffing from my lips as I inched closer. To the chair, I knelt beside the doll. Its tiny mouth didn't move, but the voice, those whispers grew louder, more frantic. My fingers, trembling, reached toward it. I told myself I wouldn't touch it. Just look, that's all. But then my hand brushed against its cold porcelain face. The whispers stopped. Immediately, like a switch had been flipped, the silence was so sudden it throbbed in my ears. I exhaled a shaky breath and rose to my feet, backing away. See? Nothing happened. It's just an old doll. Just a slam. The door behind me slammed shut, shaking the walls. I spun around, heart in my throat, the knife raised in reflex. The flashlight flickered wildly. I aimed it back at the chair. The doll was gone. My throat tightened. I hadn't heard it move. I hadn't looked away long enough for it to vanish. But it wasn't there anymore. The chair was empty, just indentations where its tiny body had rested moments ago. Then the mirror on the vanity caught my attention. Something moved in the reflection. A tall, dark shape, vague, blurry just behind me. I turned around, fast. No one. But the mirror didn't lie. I aimed the light toward the vanity again. The shape flickered back into view, closer this time. Right behind me, its form long and stretched, as though it didn't belong in this world's dimensions. And its eyes, they glowed, not bright, but with a dim, unnatural burn like embers behind cracked glass. The whispers returned, no longer pleading. They were accusing. You broke the rule. You touched it. You shouldn't have. Come here. I backed toward the door, reaching for the knob. It wouldn't budge. I yanked harder. Impossible. There was no lock on the inside. The whispers grew louder, overlapping until they became a single voice, deep and guttural. Like 100 people speaking through one throat. You're not welcome. Suddenly the light from my phone flickered again and died. I was plunged into darkness. Then I felt it. A breath hot and close against the back of my neck. I turned, swinging the knife wildly into the air, hitting nothing but cold. I didn't stop to think. I dropped low and forced my weight into the door, shoulder first, until it burst open with a splintering crack. I stumbled into the hallway, gasping, but it wasn't the same hallway anymore. It was darker, longer, and at the far end, barely visible in the gloom. The doll stood there, upright, waiting. The hallway wasn't just longer, it was wrong. The kind of wrong that makes your stomach twist, like trying to recall a dream that ended in a scream. The walls seemed to pulse slightly, like they were breathing. I don't know how, but I knew the house had changed, reshaped itself while I was inside that room. I wasn't just being haunted. I was being trapped. The doll stood at the far end, completely still. Her cracked face looked almost smug in the faint glow of my dying flashlight. I tried to will it back on, hitting the side of my phone, but it remained dead, just a useless, cold rectangle in my hand. I turned, bolting for the stairs, not daring to look back. My feet pounded against the warped wooden floor, and every step echoed too loudly, like the house was mocking me. I nearly tripped as I hit the top of the staircase, catching myself on the railing just in time. Behind me, I heard the soft scuff of movement. Not a step, a dragging, like something being pulled across the floor. The whispers returned, filling the space around me like smoke, but they were different now. No longer pleading, no longer sad. They were angry. You shouldn't have touched it. You were warned. You broke the seal. Now you stay. The staircase creaked violently under me as I rushed down. I didn't dare stop. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. I just focused on the front door at the end of the hallway. When I reached it, I grabbed the handle and twisted. It didn't move. I yanked harder, still locked. I dropped the knife, using both hands, slamming my shoulder into the door like a battering ram, but it didn't even shake. The frame felt fused to the wall, no give, no cracks, just a solid and movable piece of the nightmare. You don't belong out there, you belong here, forever. The words slithered through my mind like oil. My eyes darted to the nearby windows, but they were black, darker than they should have been. I pressed my face against one, trying to look outside. Nothing, just black, not darkness, absence. Like the outside world no longer existed, like the house had eaten it. I stumbled backward, hands trembling. My chest felt tight, every breath, short and shallow. I could feel the pressure in my ears like I was descending underwater. The whispers grew louder, angry, hungry. Then I felt it again. A cold hand closed gently over my shoulder. I froze. It wasn't a grab, it was almost affectionate. Like something was claiming me, possessive. My skin crawled beneath the touch, but I couldn't move, couldn't scream. I slowly turned my head. There was nothing there, just the shadow-drenched hallway behind me, stretching farther than it should have. But the cold lingered. That's when I noticed my breath had stopped clouding the air, not because the room was warmer, but because I wasn't breathing. I gasped, stumbling forward, sucking in air like I'd been drowning. The moment broke, and I sprinted through the hallway, veering toward the back of the house, the kitchen, the back door. Maybe that one was still real, still connected to the outside. I didn't look behind me. I couldn't. The whispers chased me. Not footsteps. Just voices rushing like wind. You're ours now. There's no leaving. You shouldn't have come. I crashed into the kitchen door and twisted the knob. It turned. My heart leapt. I pulled it open. Darkness. Not a backyard. No stars. No moon. Just the void. I reached out, trying to feel for something, air, wind, anything, but my fingers met nothing but cold, black static. The world outside was gone. The house had cut me off. Behind me, something creaked, slowly, rhythmically. I turned, already knowing what I'd see. The doll. She sat in the middle of the kitchen floor now. Her head was tilted, her arms limp at her sides, but her glossy black eyes locked onto mine, watching, smiling. And behind her, the kitchen door slammed shut. I flinched, the sound like a gunshot in the quiet. The whispers returned, now a hurricane of voices, each one snarling into my head. I dropped to my knees, covering my ears, but it was no use. They weren't around me anymore, and they were inside me. You shouldn't have touched it. You let it wake up. You fed it your fear. The doll's head twitched, a sharp jerk to the side. Her smile had changed. It wasn't painted anymore. It was real. I backed away, my mind splintering beneath the weight of the impossible. My spine pressed against the kitchen counter. I reached blindly behind me, searching for a weapon, a door, a light, anything. My hand found a drawer. I yanked it open. Silverware. I grabbed the heaviest object, something that might have been an old meat tenderizer, and raised it toward the doll. But she didn't move. She didn't need to. The air around her changed. The shadows bent inward. The walls shimmered like heat waves in reverse. The floor groaned, and I felt the room shift. The whispers grew quiet. A single voice cut through the silence, one I hadn't heard before. It's awake now. Then came the sound that shattered everything. Footsteps, not the dragging from before. Heavy, deliberate steps, coming from the hallway behind the kitchen. They were slow, measured, and getting closer. The footsteps stopped just outside the kitchen door. I stood frozen, back, against the counter, fingers clutched so tightly around the meat tenderizer that my knuckles had gone white. The house had fallen still again, unnaturally so. The silence wasn't comforting. It was calculated, like it was watching to see what I'd do next. I took one step forward. The floor creaked. From the other side of the door, something breathed. Not a human breath. Not a human breath. It was wet, ragged, like something that had lungs but didn't know how to use them anymore. The sound of something that wanted to sound human and failed. The doll was still sitting in the middle of the kitchen. Her eyes didn't blink, didn't shift, but somehow I could feel them following me, watching every move, daring me to try the door, daring me to run. You shouldn't have touched it. You broke the seal. You belong to the house now. The whispers had returned. But now they didn't come from the walls or the corners. They came from her, from the doll. Each word vibrated through the air as if the room itself was echoing her voice. The longer I stood there, the more it felt like the space was warping, like the house was stretching around me, folding me deeper into itself. Every second made me feel less like a visitor and more like a possession. I turned to the pantry door behind me. Maybe I can hide, catch my breath, regroup. As I opened I nearly screamed. The pantry was gone. It should have been a small, shallow closet, but instead it opened into a dark, winding stairwell that descended into blackness. The smell hit me first, damp, rotting wood, mold, something metallic, something dead. Go down, the doll whispered. It's waiting for you. I slammed the door shut, heart hammering. No way. I wasn't going down there. I turned back toward the hallway. The footsteps had resumed. Slower now. Closer. 1, 2. Pause. And then again. 3, 4. Whatever. Was on the other side, was enjoying this. Drawing it out. I had to move. I grabbed my phone again, dead. No light, no signal. Just a cracked screen and a reflection I didn't recognize. My own face looked off, pale, lips tinged slightly blue. Eyes sunken, like I'd been trapped here for days instead of hours. The back door. I bolted for it, flung it open, and once again, I was greeted by that same suffocating void. A swirling, ink-black nothingness. I could hear the house creaking behind me, the walls groaning like lungs pulling in breath. Then something moved in the darkness outside. I couldn't see it directly, but I felt it. A presence enormous and shapeless, crouched just beyond the threshold, watching, waiting. I slammed the door and locked it, chest heaving. Then the footsteps stopped, right at the kitchen entrance. And slowly the doorknob began to turn. Click. It moved only an inch, before stopping, like it wasn't testing the door to open it, but to see if I'd react. I stood perfectly still. The whispers returned, now layered, rushing like a storm tide against the inside of my skull. Feed it. Bleed for it. You woke it up, then silence. No footsteps. No whispers. Just the sound of the old house breathing. Around me, I turned back toward the doll. She was gone. My stomach dropped. I scanned the room. Knife ready. Flashlight dead. Then a soft creak echoed from behind me from the counter. I turned. There she was, standing. The doll stood upright. On the counter, her arms limp, her head tilted ever so slightly. Her mouth, once painted into a perfect porcelain smile, was open now, and she was breathing. Tiny, ragged exhales puffed from between her cracked lips. Her glassy eyes shimmered with something alive, something inside. I took a step back. She took one forward, no movement, no legs, just a shift. A blink, and she was closer. The whispers screamed. It's inside her now. It found a voice. You let it in. The doll's head snapped toward me, too fast, like a marionette yanked on invisible strings. And then she spoke. Not whispered. Not mimicked. She spoke. He wears the house now. I backed into the door, reaching for the handle again. I had to get out. Had to find another exit, another room, anything. Then the hallway lights flickered. The door behind the doll creaked open slowly, revealing only blackness, and a figure stepped inside. No details. No face. Just a tall, hunched shadow, the outline barely holding together, limbs too long, shoulders scraping the frame. Its head tilted once, twice. The doll turned toward it and bowed. I watched in frozen horror as the shadow leaned forward. It didn't touch the floor. It floated inches above it, dragging parts of itself like a veil of smoke. And as it passed the threshold into the kitchen, the walls around it shuddered like the house was holding its breath. I bolted. I didn't look back. I didn't think. I just ran out of the kitchen, into the hall, through the parlor, past rooms I didn't remember passing before. I ran until my lungs burned, until the house felt like a maze that changed behind me with every turn. And still, behind me, the whispers followed. The house had no end. Room after room, hallway after hallway. I tore through each one, but none of them led anywhere familiar. Doors that should have opened to the front foyer now led to identical bedrooms, each one colder than the last. The house had become a maze, alive and twisting, swallowing every path I thought I understood. And behind me, always just a few paces behind, the whispers crawled. Don't run. You belong. It needs a voice. My lungs burned. My heart was pounding like a war drum. I stumbled into what I thought was the study, crashing through a half-rotted door. Books and papers were strewn across. The room like they'd been flung by a storm. But there on the far shelf stood something I recognized. The lantern, old, rusty, covered in soot, but intact. I lunged for it, my shaking hands fumbling through the nearby drawer until I found a matchbox. The first match snapped in half. The second refused to light. My hands were trembling too hard. I forced myself to breathe steady, damn it, and struck the third. Flick. A flame. I lit the lantern, and warm, golden light bloomed into the room. The change was instant. The whispers cut off like they'd been yanked away. The chill in the air receded. For the first time in what felt like hours, I could hear myself again, my ragged breaths, my racing heartbeat. The house went quiet, but not empty. I turned toward the doorway, clutching the lantern like a shield. And there it was. The shadow. The same twisted figure I'd seen in the kitchen doorway. Tall, elongated, its face just a blur of shifting. Darkness, like it refused to hold a single shape. Its eyes burned dimly like coals deep in its head, glowing with something ancient and hungry. It stepped forward, but the lantern's light repelled it. The thing flinched, its form flickering, like smoke under pressure. I lifted the lantern higher, daring to take a step toward it. For the first time, the house itself seemed to pull back like it was being wounded by the flame. You can't leave. It hissed not from its mouth, but directly into my thoughts. This is your place now? You fed it? You woke it? No, I muttered, voice cracking. I didn't ask for this. The figure's smile, if it was a smile, widened grotesquely. But you listened. I backed toward the hallway, the lantern held between us like a cross. It recoiled again, snarling in a voice that sounded like dozens of mouths. In desperation, I hurled the lantern at it. The glass shattered midair. The oil inside ignited, exploding into the hallway in a flash of orange fire. The figure let out a sound, no, a scream, not just loud, but wrong, layered and animalistic. The fire licked across the walls, catching instantly, like the entire house had been soaked in. Gasoline. I turned and ran. Flames roared behind me, chasing me down the hallways. Smoke filled the air, thick and choking. The house shrieked around me, beams groaned, pipes burst, plaster cracked and rained down from above. The voices returned now, screaming in panic and fury. You brought this. We were sleeping. You woke us up. I didn't care. I reached the kitchen again. The doll was still there burning. Her tiny frame cracked and blistered, porcelain melting, and popping under the heat. And even through the roar of the fire, I could hear her whispering, "You should have stayed." I slammed my shoulder into the back door again. This time it burst open. And outside, there was air, real air. Cold night wind on my face. The trees, the stars. I fell onto the grass, coughing, smoke pouring from my mouth like I had been drowning. In it, I rolled over and looked up at the house. It was ablaze. Orange light poured from every window like the house was bleeding fire. I heard things screaming inside. Voices, shapes, beings, all of them caught in the inferno. I didn't wait to see if any made it out. I just ran. Through the yard. Down the road. Away from everything. By the time I reached the main road, my legs nearly gave out beneath me. I collapsed onto the pavement, lungs burning. I pulled out my phone. The screen flickered. Then came to life. I had service. Bars, battery. It was working again. And then, right as I started to dial for help, a notification slid across the screen. A message. No number. Just one line. You may have escaped, but we are always with you. I stared at it, my fingers trembling. Then the phone vibrated again, and the screen changed. The front-facing camera had turned on. And in the reflection, I wasn't alone. Behind me, just over my shoulder, were two hollow black eyes watching me. No body, no face, just the void staring through me. I dropped the phone and scrambled back, but there was nothing there. The road was empty, just the wind through the trees and the distant glow of the fire behind me. But I know what I saw, and I know now I never really left that house. Part of it came with me. It was supposed to be just another boring afternoon. I'd been meaning to clean out the attic ever since I moved in 6 months ago. The place had always felt a little dot 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 off, like the walls were listening. But I told myself it was just age. The creaking of a structure settling into its decay. Still, curiosity or guilt finally won. I pulled down the old wooden ladder, braced myself, and climbed into the dust-choked dark. The air was thicker up there, like it hadn't been disturbed in decades. My flashlight beam swept across boxes of junk, old furniture, yellowed newspapers. A broken mirror propped against the far wall. Cobwebs clung to everything like the house was trying to hold on to the past. That's when I saw it. Half buried. Beneath a pile of moth-eaten blankets, a small leather-bound book, faded and worn at the edges. The kind of object you'd expect to find in a museum or a grave. My first instinct was to leave it, but something made me reach out. As soon as my fingers brushed the cover, I felt a strange tingling sensation, like static, crawling up my arm. The diary creaked open. The pages were yellowed, the handwriting frantic, jagged like someone had written in a rush shaky lines, uneven pressure. My eyes skimmed the first entry, then the next. My heart slowed, then pounded harder. The first few pages detailed someone's life, but not just any life. Mine. It described the breakfast I made that morning: eggs, toast, coffee with exactly 1.5 sugars. It described the message I had sent to my friend, asking if they wanted to hang out this weekend. It even mentioned the old band tee I had thrown on without thinking. I flipped to the most recent page. My blood went cold. He's reading these. Words right now, the entry read, but he won't see what's standing behind him. I froze. For a second, the attic felt deathly still. Even the air stopped moving. A prickling chill slid down my spine as I turned my head slowly to look behind me. Nothing. Just cobwebs, old boxes, and the bare light bulb swinging ever so slightly above my head. I laughed, a dry, hollow sound. A prank, I said aloud, trying to convince myself. Maybe one of the previous owners had a sense of humor. Maybe they left the diary behind as some sort of twisted scavenger hunt. But even as I said it, I didn't believe it. How would they have known about this morning? About my exact meal? About the text I sent less than an hour ago? My hand shook as I flipped back through the entries. Each page dug deeper, listing intimate, mundane details only I could have known. My strange habit of tapping the counter when I'm anxious. The tune I hum when washing dishes. The way I constantly check my phone even when I know one's messaged. Me. There were no names in the book, just descriptions. Precise, unnerving snapshots of moments in my life. Then the attic light flickered. The old bulb above me buzzed and dimmed, swinging in a lazy arc that sent shadows spinning across the room. The diary pages seemed to ripple in the shifting light. For a second, I could have sworn the ink pulsed like veins under skin. The bulb snapped back to full brightness. I slammed the diary shut, heart pounding. Whatever this was, I didn't want to read anymore. I stuffed the book into my jacket pocket and turned to climb down. Each creak of the attic stairs made me wince. The air felt heavier with every step, like the house didn't want me to leave. Then, just as I reached the hallway, a whisper, soft, barely audible, but real. Don't leave. You're not done yet. I stopped mid-step. The diary in my pocket suddenly felt heavier, like it was pulling me backward. My head swam. I whipped around again. Nothing. But my ears were ringing. That whisper still hung in the air, pressing against my thoughts. I rushed down the remaining steps and slammed the attic door shut, locking it with shaky hands. The house was quiet again, too quiet. I stared down the hall toward the living room, the hallway darker than it should have been. Outside, it had begun to rain. Thunder rumbled far off, low and distant, as if warning me of something I didn't yet understand. I walked quickly, too. The living room, flipping every light switch along the way. Most of the bulbs obeyed, but a few flickered like they were struggling against the dark. Sitting on the couch, I pulled the diary from my pocket. Don't open it, I told myself, but I had to know. The next page was Messier, as if the writer had been panicked. He tries to run, it read, but the house won't let him. The doors won't open. The windows are sealed. I laughed again, more out of fear than amusement. Nice try. I whispered, heading for the front door. It didn't open. I twisted the handle harder. Nothing. The lock turned, but the door stayed shut, as if the wood itself refused to move. Cold panic seeped into my chest. I ran to the nearest window, tried to slide it open. It didn't budge, not even a rattle. Something was wrong. Terribly, impossibly wrong. And then, behind me I heard them again, the whispers. But this time, there was more than one voice. The whispers weren't like anything I'd heard before. They weren't just voices. They were thoughts, My thoughts echoed and twisted. They spoke in overlapping layers, as though dozens of people were reading from the same script, but each with their own broken rhythm. I couldn't understand what they were saying, but the intent was unmistakable. They knew me. The air in the house was thick, almost syrupy, every breath harder than the last. I backed away from the sealed window, heart hammering in my chest, trying to make sense of it all. This couldn't be real. This had to be a breakdown exhaustion, a hallucination, maybe some kind of carbon monoxide leak. I stumbled into the kitchen, searching for something, anything to prove I hadn't lost my grip on reality. But the lights overhead began to flicker again, and then I heard it, the diary, from the living room. I could hear it, turning pages on its own. I edged closer, careful, as if the book had become an animal. I peeked around the corner. The diary was where I'd left it, on the couch cushion, but its pages were fluttering like a fan had turned on. There was no wind, no draft. I stepped forward. The pages stopped. One last page flipped purposefully. The room was dead silent, but I could feel something watching. I bent down slowly and read the fresh words scrawled in that same jagged. And he's reading this now. He thinks he can leave. He thinks it hasn't seen him, but it always sees. My knees locked. I shot a glance over my shoulder. Nothing. I stood up quickly, stuffing the diary under my arm like it might bite me if I wasn't careful. My phone. I needed to call someone. Anyone. I pulled it from my pocket. The screen was black. Dead. No. STARTUP logo. No charge screen. Nothing. I knew it had 80% battery. I had charged it just that morning. I grabbed the charger from the kitchen and plugged it in. No light. No response. My reflection in the black phone screen stared back at me, except it looked off. Too pale. The eyes ... weren't mine. The face was still unmoving even as I shifted. It blinked before I did. I flung the phone across the room. It hit the wall with a sharp crack, but I didn't look to see if it broke. My attention was pulled again to the diary. It was humming, not loudly, just a soft vibration. Like something inside it was alive and breathing, like it was purring. My hands itched to open it again. Something in my mind, something I didn't recognize as my own, urged me. Keep reading, it whispered, with my voice. I sat back down, almost involuntarily. The pages were waiting. I flipped to the next one. He doesn't know yet, but the diary wasn't found. It found him. It wrote itself into his attic, just like it did the others. The others? I turned the page more violently now. A list. Names, dates. Some crossed out. Some not. I scanned the list and my stomach dropped. The final name on the page. You, 5:48 p.m. I checked the clock on the wall. 5:48 p.m. I dropped the book like it was acid. Backed away from it. My mind reeled. Was this a curse? A game? Some sick, self-writing book that recorded lives before taking them? The whispers surged again, like static over a radio signal. I'd press my hands to my ears, but they bled through the skin, worming into my thoughts like needles. I heard fragments. You opened it. You let it see. Now it writes your end. I stumbled out of the room, bumping into the hallway table and knocking over a framed photo. I picked it up without thinking, but my blood ran cold when I looked at it. The picture was of me standing in the attic, holding the diary. The same expression. The same shirt. The same moment, except no one had taken that photo. I had never owned that frame. I turned it over nothing. Just an old, dusty frame and a photograph that should never exist. I tossed it to the ground and ran toward the front door again, adrenaline overriding the fear. I yanked the handle. Nothing. Then I punched it, slammed my shoulder against the wood, kicked until my leg ached. The door stood firm, unyielding, like it was part of the house's skeleton. I screamed. Not words, just rage, terror, desperation. Then the diary called again. This time it didn't whisper. It laughed. The sound echoed down the hallway, wet and throaty, like something that hadn't used vocal cords in a century. It didn't come from a throat, it came from deep inside the house itself. The lights flickered once more, and this time didn't come back on. I was plunged into darkness. For a moment, I stood there in silence, and footsteps, not mine, not human. A slow dragging step coming down the attic stairs. The sound of dragging footsteps echoed down the attic stairs, deliberate, wet, and unnervingly slow. I pressed my back to the wall, breath caught in my throat. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but there was nowhere to go. The doors were sealed, the windows wouldn't open, and the house itself seemed to bend and breathe around me like a living thing, and still the footsteps came. One at a time, creak. Drag, creak. Drag. My eyes darted down the hallway toward the attic entrance. The pull string hung limp, swaying slightly even though the air was dead still. I couldn't see what was coming, but I didn't need to. I felt it, the same way you feel a nightmare before it fully forms. I clutched the wall, inching toward the kitchen. My heart pounded so loud it felt like it might shatter my ribs. The diary was still in the living room where I'd left it, humming low, almost ... satisfied. I couldn't go back for it. Not now. As I passed the mirror hanging near the hallway corner, I glanced at it, just instinct. I wish I hadn't, because my reflection wasn't alone. Standing behind me in the mirror, only in the mirror, was a figure, tall, thin, skin stretched tight like parchment. No eyes. Just hollow sockets, black and endless. Its mouth was open, lips curled back in a sick grin that didn't reach where I should have been. And behind that smile were more teeth. Layers of them. It wasn't in the hallway, only in the mirror. But as I watched in horror, it lifted a hand. I spun around, swinging wildly, but there was nothing. Only empty air. When I looked back to the mirror, the figure was gone. I collapsed to my knees, gasping for air, and suddenly I could hear it again, the pages of the diary fluttering from the other room. Faster this time, like something was flipping through them in a frenzy. Then silence. The house went still. I crawled forward, dragging myself into the kitchen, my limbs trembling. The lighter from earlier was still on the counter. I grabbed it, checked its fuel level half full. A stupid plan formed in my mind. Burn the diary. I didn't care if it was cursed or alive or possessed. I'd throw it into the flames and light the house if I had to. I needed this thing out of my life. I took a shaky step into the living room. The diary had moved. It now sat upright in the center of the rug, open, waiting. As I moved closer, more words appeared across the page, bleeding into the paper like fresh ink. He thinks the fire will save him. But he forgets paper can't burn when it wants to be read. The lighter in my hand suddenly felt cold. Unnaturally cold. My thumb hovered over the wheel, but I hesitated. Then, behind me, a whisper, not like the others. This one was mine. My own voice, muttering in my ear, "You can't run from yourself." I turned. The hallway was filled with mirrors. Not just the one from before all of them, from every room in the house. Some were cracked, others fogged. But all of them reflected me. Dozens of versions, staring back, some smiling, some crying, one covering his mouth in terror. And behind each version of me, the figure. It loomed in every reflection, slowly creeping closer to the mirror's surface, like it was swimming through the glass. I stumbled back into the living room and flicked the lighter. The flame burst to life. "No more," I muttered. "No more." Pages. I dropped it onto the diary. The flame hissed and died, like it had been smothered by invisible fingers. The diary didn't even smolder. Instead, the pages turned themselves again. One by one, faster than before, faster than I could track. The lights overhead sparked, burst, and shattered. Glass rained down like sharp rain, and then a single page landed. Still, calm. I leaned in, unwilling, but compelled. This time, the words were carved deep into the page, as if written with a knife. He has seen too much. He knows the Watchers. He will become the next. Suddenly I couldn't move. My body locked. Frozen. My heartbeat slowed. The room darkened, not with shadow, but with presence. Something had entered, or awakened. I couldn't tell. And then, behind me, I heard a familiar sound. Dragging footsteps. Coming from the living room this time. Not the attic. Not the mirror. The thing had crossed over. I forced my head to turn inch by inch until I saw it fully, not in a reflection. It stood just feet away. The skin was paper thin, covered in writing, words from the diary tattooed across its flesh. My texts, my thoughts, my memories all scrawled across its face, its arms, its chest. It opened its mouth. And in my own voice, it whispered, "It's time to finish the story." The thing spoke in my voice, but it wasn't just imitation. It was my voice, pulled from my memories, my throat, my breath. It stood at the edge of the living room, hunched. And grotesque, its frame thin and twitching, like it couldn't quite decide how to stand human. And its skin, God, its skin. It was covered in writing my life, bleeding across its flesh. The shirt I wore on my first day of school, my mother's lullaby. The exact words I muttered when I stubbed my toe last week. It was all there, scrawled, in endless lines, as though my existence had been transcribed and bound into the muscle and meat of this thing. It took a step forward. The floor groaned under its weight, not because it was heavy, but because it was wrong. The world didn't want it here. Every board, every wall, every corner of the house recoiled as it moved. "You were never meant to find the diary," it said, still with my voice. "It was meant to find you. You were written long before." You ever read it? My legs backed me away on instinct. I tripped over the coffee table, fell hard on my shoulder, and scrambled toward the hallway. "There's no use running now," it said. "You've already turned the final page." I didn't care. I had to try. I bolted down the hallway toward the bathroom, anywhere I could hide, breathe, think. The mirrors were still there. Every wall now bore a reflection of myself, each one still twisted. Some versions of me were screaming, blood running from their eyes. Others were smiling with mouths too wide. One was gone entirely, replaced by that thing standing behind glass, watching me like prey. I slammed the bathroom door shut and locked. The lights flickered, then held. A single bulb buzzed overhead. For a second, everything was silent, except the frantic beat of my heart and the rasp of my breathing. I turned to the mirror over the sink. My face stared back. My real face, but then I blinked, and the mirror didn't. It just kept staring, blank, and then the reflection smiled. I didn't. I stumbled back, slipping on the tile as the reflection lifted its hand and placed it against the glass. From the other side, the mirror bulged like it was made of rubber. Fingers pushed through first, followed by an arm, and then the upper body of me, not a creature, not a monster, but me, exactly me, crawling out of the mirror like it had always lived inside it. I screamed and flung open the door, slamming it behind me. I didn't even check to see if the lock caught. I just ran, back toward the living room, toward the diary. It had moved again. Now it was floating, suspended in the center of the room, pages fluttering around it like wings. The words were spilling off the pages and etching themselves into the floor, the walls, even the ceiling. The house wasn't a house anymore. It was becoming part of the book, part of the story. And I was the final chapter. That's what I saw. The fireplace, still cold, still empty. And next to it, the broken remains of the candlestick I'd tried to use earlier. I didn't know if it would work, but I had to try something, anything. I grabbed the base of the candlestick, stood up, and charged the floating diary. The whispers shrieked, hundreds of them, all at once. The walls pulsed, the lights shattered again, and from the hallway I could hear the reflection version of myself pounding on the walls as it pursued me. I raised the candlestick and swung. Hard. The metal tore through the book like it was made of cloth. A deafening, ear-splitting scream echoed through the house, not from a throat, but from the walls themselves. The diary convulsed in midair, then dropped to the floor like a wounded animal, spasming, The lights went black. The air turned hot. And the paper-skinned creature with my voice stepped into the room once more. He was no longer smiling. You weren't supposed to fight back, it hissed. You were supposed to read. And fade? I backed toward the fireplace again, diary clutched in one hand, the bent candlestick in the other. Flames. I needed flames. I reached into the hearth, fumbling with the old log I'd left for winter. My hand found something dry kindling. I struck the lighter, the one that had failed earlier. Once, twice, nothing. Third try, the flame caught. The diary screamed again, louder this time, the voice now more human, less alien. Almost scared. You burn the book, you burn yourself, the creature warned. You are the words now. You are the ink. I didn't listen. I shoved the diary into the hearth and held the lighter to the pages. At first, nothing happened. Then the ink bubbled. The leather cover began to curl, and with it, the room started to crack. The shadows writhed, trying to retreat. The mirrors in the hallway shattered, one by one, like glass lungs exploding under pressure. The creature shrieked and lunged toward me, and as the first true flame caught the diary and began to consume it, I turned to face it head on. The diary burned. It didn't ignite like dry paper, it screamed. The flames curled the edges of the pages, the ink sizzling as if it were blood. The moment fire touched it, the house changed. The floor cracked underfoot. The ceiling groaned like a wounded animal. The walls trembled violently, bleeding ink from every corner and seam. The whispers turned into shrieks, thousands of voices, all howling in agony. And yet the diary continued to burn, slowly, stubbornly, as if fighting the flame with every word. The creature lunged at me, its skin tearing like old parchment as it moved. I raised the bent candlestick like a weapon and slammed it into the side of its head. It didn't flinch. It didn't bleed. It just turned its face back toward me, its hollow eyes narrowing into something like hatred. The smile was gone now. The false voice it wore was cracking, warping, like a vinyl record melting in heat. You were written to finish. It rasped, its voice no longer mine. You were never the reader. You were the ending. I backed up toward the hearth, the diary still blazing behind me. The flames had spread to the floor around it, burning with a cold, bluish hue. The ink on the wood hissed and boiled as the fire touched it, and the entire living room seemed to pulse with heat and anger. Then I'll end it my way, I said, barely a whisper, but firm. The creature lunged again. This time, it moved faster, its paper-thin arms stretching as it reached for my throat. I ducked, rolled to the side, and grabbed a fireplace poker. With all the force I could muster, I jabbed it into the thing's chest. It screamed not in pain, but in protest. A plume of black smoke erupted from the wound, and I saw something horrific beneath the surface. Beneath the ink-covered skin were pages. Real, physical pages, flipping wildly. Each one had a different part of my life scrawled across it. Memories, actions, thoughts I'd never spoken aloud. This thing, it wasn't alive. It was a book in flesh. And it was unraveling. The fire behind me roared louder as the flames consumed more of the diary. The floorboards split open. The whispers began to die off, some fading into nothing, others sobbing softly like children being erased. The creature screamed and stumbled backward, clutching its chest as more pages tore loose from inside it. They fluttered into the air and burst into ash before they hit the ground. You can't erase it, it wailed. The story continues without you. Under like another name. I kicked the creature, sending it reeling into the burning diary. It collapsed onto the hearth, its body convulsing as the flame spread to its limbs. And then it burned, not like flesh, like paper. The creature curled in on itself, and with one final ear-splitting shriek, it crumpled into a pile of ash. And just like that, silence. The fire went out. The diary was gone. The room was scorched black, but still. The air felt lighter, cleaner, like a long-held breath had finally been exhaled. I dropped the fireplace poker and stumbled backward, my body trembling. My ears rang with the absence of voices. For the first time in hours, maybe days, I could think without something else. Listening, I sat down in the middle of the charred floor. For several minutes, I didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even breathe deeply. I just existed. Then the house creaked again. I looked up, heart spiking. But this time, it was just the structure settling. Just a house, nothing more. Eventually, I stood and checked my phone, not expecting much. But somehow, it had power again, a full charge, like it had never died at all. And I had signal. I don't remember dialing, but I called my friend any friend. I needed someone to hear my voice. When he answered, I almost cried. "Dude, are you okay?" he asked. "You sound weird." "I'm fine," I whispered. "I think I'm fine now." "What happened?" he asked. "You just disappeared. I stopped getting your texts yesterday. You okay?" "Yeah," I said. "There was something. I found this diary and I stopped." There was a new message on my phone. It hadn't been there before. Just one line. "You wrote this ending." But endings can be edited. My hand started to shake again. I turned slowly. On the mantel above the fireplace sat a book. Not burnt. Not charred. Whole. The diary. Exactly where I had first placed it. Waiting. Open. With a new entry already written. It thinks it's over. But the next page turns soon. I didn't want to go near it. But the diary sat on the mantel, like it had never been touched by flame, its leather cover unblemished, its spine straight and proud. The pages fluttered softly as if teased by a breeze that didn't exist. No smoke, no ash, no burn marks on the floor around it, just that same soft hum in the air. My phone buzzed in my hand again. Another message. This one from an unknown number. "You can't end a story that doesn't want to end." I turned the phone off, pulled the battery, even, tossed it into the cold hearth. But deep down, I already knew this wasn't about the phone, or the house, or the fire. It was about me. I had read the words, absorbed them. I had touched the ink, stared too long into the mirror. I had seen the watcher's face, and that meant it had seen me. I stepped forward, unable to stop myself, like a puppet pulled by strings I couldn't see. My hand rose slow, trembling, and turned the next page. The handwriting was different now. Sharper, angrier, more aware. He turned the page, as he always would, as he always will. His curiosity will undo him again and again. The room shifted. The walls stretched, pulsing with ink-veined cracks. I heard whispers behind them, dozens, hundreds, muttering in unison. "He's seen too much. He's too loud. He keeps changing the story." I backed away, but the diary flipped another page on its own. This one had no words, just a rough sketch of me, drawn in frantic strokes, wide-eyed, mouth open mid-scream. In the sketch, hands reached out of the dark toward my back. And behind those hands, the watcher, still grinning, still eyeless, still waiting. "No," I whispered, backing away. "I destroyed you. I watched you burn." But as I spoke, I realized something chilling. The diary hadn't burned, only the story inside it, and now it needed a new one. A fresh subject, a willing reader. I turned and ran, again, out of the house, down the porch steps, through the muddy grass and across the street, not stopping until I reached the nearest gas station. I burst through the door, soaking wet, covered in soot and sweat. The cashier froze when he saw me. "Hey, man, are you okay?" I didn't answer, not right away. Instead, I looked around, making sure the world was still real. Still mine. It was, for now. "I need to use your phone," I managed. He slid it over the counter, eyes wide. I dialed the number from my friend again. Voicemail. I tried again. Voicemail. Ben. Just as I began to leave a message. The phone buzzed. The screen flickered, and there it was again. "You may leave the house, but the story doesn't leave you." I slammed the phone down and ran into the bathroom, locked the door. Splash water on my face, heart racing. I looked into the mirror and stopped. It was me, no shadows behind, No watchers, just my reflection. But then the corner of my mouth twitched. Not mine, the reflection's. It began to grin. Slowly, cruelly. And from inside the mirror, the whisper came again, faint, amused. Turn the page. The lights overhead exploded in a flash of sparks. I stumbled back against the stall door, breathing fast, fists clenched. No, I wouldn't read it again. I wouldn't be the next chapter. I ran out of the bathroom, stormed out of the gas station, and made it back home. The house stood silent under the dark sky. The window still black. The door still closed. Like nothing had happened. Like everything had happened. I stepped inside, and there it was. On the floor, waiting for me. The diary. It hadn't just returned. It had always been here, and now it was open again. A pen sat beside it, waiting. I didn't pick it up. Not right away. But as I sit here now, hours later, I realize something. The diary doesn't need to be read. It just needs to be written. I've already started. I don't even remember opening the cover again or picking up the pen, but the words keep coming. They pour from my head, down my arm, into the ink. I've filled dozens of pages, all about you. Reading this, no, yes, you. I wrote everything you just read, every word, every thought, every action. And I left a warning in the margins, but you missed it. It said, if you're still reading, it's already too late. Because the diary knows you now. It's watching through your screen. Through the ink in your veins. Through the flicker in your lights. The next page is yours. And the story. It never ends. When I bought the house, I thought I'd gotten a good deal. Yes, but charming. With the kind of creaky floorboards and vintage fixtures that people romanticized online. It had been empty for years, according to the agent, which explained the thick layers of dust and the musky smell lingering in the upper levels. I didn't mind. I figured a little cleaning would fix that. I didn't expect to find the door. It was the third week after I moved in when I decided to finally check the attic. The rest of the house was already cleaned and unpacked, but the attic had been left alone. I'd told myself it was because I didn't need anything up there, huh? Yeah, but really, I think I was avoiding it. The place gave me the creeps. The stairs up were narrow, the wooden steps warped and groaning under my weight. The attic door itself resisted when I tried to open it, like the house didn't want me going up there. Once I did get it open, I was met with a wave of stale, frigid air. The light from the hallway only reached so far, so I had to bring a flashlight. Dust-coated everything boxes stacked like crumbling towers. Old sheets draped over furniture like shrouds, cobwebs dangling from the rafters. I coughed and waved a hand through the thick air, sweeping my light across the forgotten clutter. That's when I saw it. Tucked away in the far corner of the attic, almost completely obscured by a stack of moldy boxes and a collapsed armchair, was a tiny wooden door. It looked completely out of place. The wood was darker than the rest of the attic, and it designed small brass hinges. A keyhole with an ornate rim didn't match anything else in the house. It looked newer, or at least less decayed. I stared at it for a long moment, heart beating a little faster. The door couldn't have been more than 4 feet tall. It wasn't listed on the floor plan. I would have remembered something like that. I moved the boxes aside, half expecting a mouse or worse to scurry out. Nothing. Just silence. The air around the door felt colder, heavier. I knelt down and tried the handle, but it was locked. Figures. I stood there for a few seconds, considering whether I should just leave it alone. But curiosity won out. I remembered the box of old keys I'd found in the kitchen drawer left by the previous owners, probably forgotten. I hadn't thrown them out, though I had no idea what they unlocked. I ran downstairs and rummaged through the drawer until I found them, 10 keys, all different shapes and sizes. I raced back up to the attic and tried them one by one. The 7th one clicked. The sound echoed through the attic like a gunshot. The door creaked open slowly, and I had to crouch low to peer inside. It was dark pitch black, and the flashlight only reached so far. I hesitated. Every instinct told me not to go in. But again, curiosity got the better of me. I ducked through the opening and stepped inside. The room was small, no more than 10 feet wide, and lined wall to wall with shelves. My beam of light scanned the space, revealing what I thought at first were porcelain dolls, hundreds of them. But as I stepped closer, the breath caught in my throat. They weren't just any dolls, they were me. Every single one had my face, my features, my hair, my skin tone, my eyes. Some had short hair, some long. Some were dressed in clothes I recognized. One was wearing the exact sweater I had on. Even the scar above my eyebrow from when I fell off a bike as a kid was replicated perfectly on several of them. I stumbled backward, crashing into the doorframe. My flashlight trembled in my grip as I scanned the room again. I was dizzy, like I'd been drugged. My mind refused to accept what I was seeing. Who could have made these? Why do they look like me? I took a shaky step forward and reached out to touch one. The porcelain was ice cold. Its eyes, my eyes, reflected the light in a way that made them look alive. The detail was beyond uncanny. They weren't handmade. They were crafted with an obsession, with intent. Then I noticed something that made my stomach twist. Some of the dolls weren't just dressed like me. They were dressed in outfits I hadn't even worn yet. One had on the red hoodie I had just bought last week, but hadn't taken out of the closet. Another wore pajamas I'd only seen at a department store, at ones I had considered buying, but never did. And then, right as I turned to leave, one of the dolls shifted. It was slight, so slight I almost missed it. A tilt of the head, like it was adjusting to get a better look at me. My flashlight darted back to it, and the doll was still again sitting perfectly upright, its little hands folded neatly in its lap. I slammed the door shut. From the other side, a whisper slipped. Through the crack, faint, breathless, "You shouldn't have come, ... I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them, those doll versions of me, their glassy eyes and pale, lifeless faces staring back. That whisper, so faint and close, replayed again and again in my mind. "You shouldn't have come." The next morning, I tried to go about my day like nothing had happened. I told myself I must have imagined some of it, the whisper, the movement. Maybe the attic had gotten to me. Old houses make noises. Light plays tricks on tired eyes. I repeated those excuses like a mantra, trying to drown out the very real terror clawing at my insides. But the unease didn't go away. I avoided the attic. I didn't even want to look at the ceiling above me. It felt like something was up there, waiting, watching. I made coffee and sat in the kitchen, scrolling aimlessly through my phone. That's when I noticed something strange. A photo in my camera roll. I hadn't taken any pictures recently, and yet there it was, a blurry, grainy image taken from inside the attic room. My face, or the face of one of the dolls, was right in the center, staring dead on at the camera. Behind it, I could make out a wall of shelves, slightly out of focus, lined with more of me. I stared at the screen, a chill running down my spine. My hands trembled as I deleted the image, but even after it was gone, the discomfort stayed. Had I taken that picture without realizing? Or had something else taken it? I spent the rest of the day with the TV on and all the lights in the house glowing, as if brightness could somehow shield me. But as the sky outside began to darken, the creaking returned. Slow, deliberate, unmistakable footsteps in the attic. At first, I froze. Then I did what I told myself I wouldn't do. I grabbed my phone and slowly climbed the attic stairs. Each step moaned under my weight, echoing like a warning in the narrow shaft. I paused at the top, hand hovering over the knob. The air felt colder again, thick with a pressure that made it hard to breathe. I gritted my teeth and opened the attic door. Nothing had changed. The clutter remained where I left it. The tiny door to the hidden room was still closed. I stood there for a moment, listening. No footsteps, no whispers, just the sound of my own shallow breathing and the distant hum of wind brushing against the shingles above. I turned to leave, but then the door creaked open on its own. Just a few inches. Just enough to make my heart seize up in my chest. I didn't want to go in. I knew I shouldn't, but the door had opened. Something wanted me to see. I raised my phone, hit record, and stepped inside. The flashlight illuminated the rows of dolls once more, but something was different. There were more of them, dozens more. I recognized the doll in a black hoodie I wore yesterday. Another had on the pajama pants I was wearing that morning. One even had my phone in its tiny porcelain hand, the same model and case as mine. I stared in horror as I realized they were documenting me in real time. Every outfit, every movement. Then I noticed a new shelf in the corner, a smaller one. There were dolls that hadn't fully formed, yet unfinished replicas with blank faces, arms missing, eyes not yet painted in. And in the middle, sitting prominently, was a half-completed doll with a gaping mouth and empty sockets where eyes should be. But what chilled me most was that it was dressed in the exact outfit I was wearing right then. That's when the whispering started again. Not from the walls, from the dolls themselves. We see you. We are you. You belong with us. The voices layered over each other, soft and childlike, but chillingly synchronized. I took a step back, and that's when my phone screen glitched. Just for a second. The image on the screen went dark, then flickered, and when it returned, the screen no longer showed me standing in the room. Instead, it showed me sitting on a shelf, smiling. I dropped the phone. Something moved in the shadows near the back of the room. A scuttling sound, like porcelain on wood. I backed toward the door, but it slammed shut before I reached it. Stay? They whispered. I tried the knob. It didn't move. Panic flooded me as I slammed my fist against the wood. Let me out! I screamed, but the only response was the rising tide of voices. More insistent now. You're one of us. Forever. The dolls began to move, not much, just twitching. Hands, nodding heads, shifting eyes, but it was enough. Enough to convince me I wasn't hallucinating. With everything I had, I kicked at the door. Once, twice. On the third try. It burst open, and I tumbled out into the main attic. I scrambled to my feet, slamming the door shut behind me. I didn't care if I broke the frame I dragged an old dresser across the door, blocking it. Silence returned. But it wasn't peaceful. It was waiting. I didn't sleep that night. Even with the attic door barricaded and every light in the house turned on, I couldn't find a shred of peace. Every creak made me jump. Every gust of wind against the window felt like tiny porcelain hands trying to get in. I kept glancing at the hallway, half expecting to see a doll waddling toward my bedroom, but nothing came. By morning, the house felt colder. Not just physically, but emotionally, as if whatever warmth had once existed here had been drained. I stared at myself in the bathroom mirror, trying to convince myself I still looked normal. That I wasn't being transformed like those half-finished things I saw on the shelf. But something was off. My eyes looked sunken, darker around the edges. My skin felt tight, like it didn't quite fit right. I leaned in closer to the mirror and noticed something horrifying, a faint hairline crack beneath my left eye. It wasn't there yesterday. I touched it, and a jolt of cold ran through my face, deep into my jaw. I stumbled backward, heart thundering, convinced for a moment I had imagined it. But when I looked again, the crack was still there, thin, almost invisible, but undeniably real. The same kind of crack I'd seen on one of the dolls in the attic. I rushed to the sink, splashed my face with cold water, and looked up again. The crack was gone, or maybe it had never been there. My mind was playing tricks. Had to be. Sleep deprivation. Stress. I needed to get out of the house. I grabbed my keys and phone, trying to keep my hands from shaking as I stepped out onto the front porch. The moment the door shut behind me, I felt the weight of the house lessen. Like I just emerged from a deep ocean. I drove to the nearest cafe, needing to be around people, normal people. The buzz of life, the clinking of coffee cups, the low murmur of conversations, it all grounded me. I almost convinced myself I had imagined everything. Almost. Until I pulled out my phone and noticed a new photo in my gallery. It was a selfie I never took of me sleeping. My eyes were closed, and in background, barely visible, was the attic door wide open. The image was dark, but if you brightened it, you could make out several small figures standing just behind the threshold. My hands went ice cold. I hadn't slept. I knew I hadn't, and I'd been locked in my room all night. Who took that photo? I looked around the cafe. No one seemed to be watching me. I quickly left, heading straight to the public library. I needed answers about the house, the previous owners, anything. After a bit of digging, I found it, an article from 1977 about the original builder of the house. A man named Harold Lorne. He had been a doll maker, a reclusive artist known for crafting eerily lifelike porcelain dolls. According to the article, he disappeared under mysterious circumstances. His workshop? You guessed it, my attic. The article mentioned something else, buried deep in the text. Several residents who had lived in the home after Lorne's disappearance reported strange noises, sightings of dolls moving on their own, and the overwhelming sense of being watched. One line stood out. They say Lorne never stopped working. They say he found a way to preserve his subjects ... forever. I left the library in a daze, stomach churning. That attic wasn't just a storage space. It had been his workspace, his shrine, and those dolls. They weren't just made in my image, they were becoming me. Back at home, the house was deathly silent. I walked up the stairs with lead in my feet, dread pooling in my stomach. The attic door was still blocked. I stood in the hallway, staring at it, and made a decision. I couldn't live like this, afraid of my own house, of my own reflection. I was going to burn the dolls. Burn the room, destroy whatever was inside before it finished whatever it had started. I grabbed a can of lighter fluid from the garage and matches from the kitchen. I stood in front of the barricade, heart pounding, but then I heard something behind me, a soft thump. I turned around slowly, and there, sitting at the bottom of the staircase ... was one of the dolls. It was positioned just so, its little hands resting on its knees, its head tilted slightly, just like mine does when I'm nervous. It was wearing the outfit I had on at the cafe. I hadn't brought it down. I hadn't left the door open. The doll blinked. Only once, but it was enough. I dropped the can of lighter fluid. I was no longer just living in the house. The house was living in me. I didn't sleep that night either. I kept the lights on in every room, pacing from window to window, half expecting to see more of them dolls. Or whatever they were spilling out of the attic, but none appeared. The one on the staircase never moved again. I wrapped it in a towel and shoved it in the trash bin outside, too afraid to destroy it. I thought maybe removing it from the house would be enough. That maybe this nightmare would end if I just erased the physical reminders. But the damage had already been done. Because that night, I looked into the mirror and saw another crack, this time above my eyebrow. Just like the scar I've always had, but this wasn't a scar. It was a hairline fracture, spidering out like broken porcelain. I touched it. It was real. My skin was cold and stiff, and the more I stared at myself, the more I noticed subtle differences. My joints didn't bend quite right anymore. My eyes had lost their usual warmth. I tapped the mirror, and for a split second, I swore the reflection lagged behind the motion. Something was replacing me. Or worse, I was changing into one of them. The whispers were back. Too louder now. Not in the attic. Not in the walls. Inside my head. You're one of us. He's chosen you. I stopped. Leaving the house. The few friends I had stopped calling after I ignored enough of their messages. I wanted to reach out to explain what was happening, but I couldn't. How do you tell someone you're turning into a doll? How do you make that sound anything but insane? I tried everything. I smeared black paint over every mirror in the house. I poured salt over the attic door. I even searched for exorcists online, but no one would come to a place like mine, not after hearing even half of my story. So I went back to the attic. I had to know if Harold Lorne was still there, still working. The room hadn't changed. The shelves were still full, my face over and over. The same expression on every porcelain head. Some had tiny tears. carved into the cheeks like they were crying. One looked like it had been screaming when it was frozen in place, but worse, there were new dolls now. On a second shelf I hadn't noticed before. Some were half finished, just heads or torsos. A few had no mouths, a few had no eyes, and one in the center had my latest outfit. Jeans, hoodie, the one I was wearing that morning. It wasn't finished yet. I couldn't breathe. I reached for it, trembling, intending to smash it to destroy at least one of them. But the moment I touched it, every doll in the room turned their heads toward me in perfect unison. I dropped it and stumbled backward, and then I heard the steps, not from behind me, from above. There was something higher than the attic, a crawl space I hadn't noticed before. A thin, square hatch in the ceiling I'd always ignored because it didn't look like it led anywhere. But now something was moving behind it, a soft scuttling, something dragging. Then a low voice that chilled my blood. You're almost ready. I ran down the stairs, out the front door, into the night. But the world outside wasn't the same anymore. My vision flickered at the edges, like a dying screen. The air felt thicker, heavier. I ran through the streets until I collapsed on a bench near the park, trembling, sobbing into my hands. When I looked up, a little girl stood nearby. She was holding something in her hands, a doll. At first, I thought it was nothing, just a kid with a toy. But then I saw its face. My face, with the cracks, the empty eyes, the same hoodie, the same jeans. The girl smiled. She told me to give this back to you. I couldn't speak. The doll's eyes rolled upward, slowly, as if it was waking up, and its tiny porcelain mouth opened just enough to whisper. Soon, I didn't go home. I couldn't. Instead, I checked into a motel on the other side of town. One of those places with flickering neon signs and cigarette burns in the sheets. I didn't care. I just needed four walls that weren't mine. A room with no attic, no whispers. But the doll the girl gave me, I hadn't taken it. I'd left it on the park bench, told myself that was the end of it. Yet when I opened the drawer of the motel nightstand, there it was, lying on a stack of outdated Bibles, its glassy eyes staring straight up at me. Cracked in the exact same places I'd noticed on my own face in the mirror. I screamed and hurled it across the room. It hit the wall and fell in a heap on the carpet. I approached it slowly, shaking, praying it would stay broken. Stay still. But it was whole again, unmarked, and now it was smiling. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of the bed with the bathroom light on, clutching a cheap motel knife in my hand like it would do anything if that thing moved. The doll never blinked, never moved, but it watched me. It watched me. The next morning, I ran. But something was off about the world. People on the street looked blurry, like images that hadn't fully loaded. Cars moved a little too smoothly. Conversations around me felt staged, like lines delivered by actors who weren't quite convincing. It was like I'd slipped into a version of the world made for me a playset, a dollhouse, and I wasn't sure who was pulling the strings anymore. I went back to my house. I know, stupid, but I had to see if the dolls were still there. If the room still existed, maybe this was a psychotic break. Maybe the room was just a figment. Maybe I could go back and find nothing. I pushed through the front door. Everything was quiet, too quiet. I climbed the stairs, heart thudding in my chest. The attic door stood open. The tiny hidden room, gone. No door, no shelves. Just a solid wall where it had once been. But the attic was full, littered with dolls. Not just of me, others now. A woman I'd seen once at the grocery store, a barista from the cafe down the street, my landlord, all staring blankly ahead. All posed like puppets mid-performance. Some had their mouths sewn shut. Others had their eyes replaced with button. One had a gaping hole in its chest, stuffed with cotton, like it had been torn open mid-transformation. Then I saw the newest addition. Standing in the center of the attic was a life-size replica of me. It was perfect, down to the tiny scar on my chin, the exact clothes I was wearing. But its eyes were dull, lifeless. It didn't move, it didn't breathe. But somehow, I knew this was the final version, the one that would take my place. A final message was written in chalk on the attic wall behind it. You have been collected. Rest now. The replacement is ready. And then I blinked. The lights in the attic dimmed. A low hum started from the walls, and it moved. The replica raised its head. Its face shifted, just slightly. It smiled. Not mechanical, not forced. A real human smile. I stumbled back. My legs hit the stairs. I fell, tumbling down, cracking my elbow against the banister. I screamed and looked up. The attic was empty. Not even dust. Just silence. After that day, I didn't go back to the house. Not even to grab my things. I stayed on the move couch hopping, sleeping in my car, motels with buzzing lights and paper-thin walls. I thought if I kept running, they wouldn't find me. The dolls. The replicas. Whatever force was behind that room. But you can't run from something that's inside you. It started subtly. Every reflection I caught, bathroom mirrors, car windows, store glass, something was always just a bit off. My reflection would smile when I wasn't tilted its head. A split second too late, blink too slow. I smashed more mirrors than I can count. But it didn't stop. I started recording myself while I slept, hoping to find, or not find, anything. And that was a mistake. The first night, the footage showed me sleeping peacefully. Normal, but at exactly 3:33 a.m., I sat up, eyes wide, unblinking, staring straight into the camera, for over 2 minutes. Then I turned my head slowly, mechanically, and whispered, "Soon." I watched that video over and over. I don't remember waking. I don't remember doing any of it. But there I was, something wearing my skin, staring back through the lens like it knew I'd be watching. The second night, I was gone from the bed, completely vanished for 6 hours. The camera never cut, no skips, just an empty bed. Until 9:12 a.m., when I suddenly reappeared, lying back down like I'd never left. I had no idea where I went. Until I checked my phone's camera roll, there were dozens of photos, all of them of me sleeping. Taken from different angles, different locations, parked cars, motel beds, backseat windows, as if someone or something was following me, documenting me, learning to be me. I went to the police. They looked at me like I was crazy. Dolls that look like you? A hidden room? Are you sure you didn't dream this? I even offered to show the footage. But when I pulled out my phone, everything was gone. No videos, no pictures, just a single file in my gallery, a photo of my old attic door, wide open, with a caption scrawled at the bottom, "We're ready now." I left the station before they could ask more questions. That night, I checked into another motel. I locked the doors, stuffed a chair under the handle, left all the lights on. But sleep came anyway, heavy, like something drugged me. And when I woke up, I wasn't in a hotel anymore. I was back, in the attic. The air was thick, unmoving. The walls were too close. I was tied to a chair, surrounded by them. The dolls, all of them staring, all of them me. Some were cracked. Some had melted faces. Some wore outfits I hadn't owned in years. But they were all there. A timeline of my version after version after version. Then the door opened, and it walked in, the life-size replica. The final version got my smile, my eyes, my voice. But colder, cleaner. It didn't speak. It didn't need to. I understood. It was replacing me, living for me. And I was the doll now. I screamed, but no sound came out. The dolls closed in. Their hands touched my skin. Cold, sharp, binding. The world faded into soft, muffled whispers. Join us. Join us. Join us. I don't know how long it's been. I'm still here, watching through glass eyes, screaming in a voice that doesn't work. And he's out there, wearing my name, living my life. If you're reading this, if you ever find a small door in your attic that shouldn't be there, don't open it. Don't look at them. Don't let them see you. Because once they do, they never stop watching. And they're always searching for a new doll. Someone just like you.